Hello everyone. In this video, we are covering the top 10 apparel manufacturing ERP systems in 2025. So let's dive right in.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
My name is Sam Gupta. I am principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent, vendor-agnostic technology advisory firm. We help our clients with digital transformation strategy, technology selection, as well as change management. On that note, let's go back to today's topic, which is the top 10 apparel manufacturing ERP systems in 2025. And when you look at different manufacturing systems, generally, most vendors as well as resellers, they try to generalize that any manufacturing systems could be a great fit for the majority of the segments, but there are always nuances of the specific micro segment. And in general, the apparel segment is very, very, very unique. And that's why you have a lot of systems that are designed for apparel-centric processes, because the generalized systems don't necessarily work, even though those flavored and tailored systems may not have as strong ERP-centric capabilities, but from the operational alignment perspective, they do far better in the way the apparel manufacturing processes are designed. So as part of this list, again, even though it is very specific to apparel manufacturing, but even this list could be very generic, accommodating many different business models, anybody and everybody who is going to be part of the apparel manufacturing value chain, which is going to be any sort of designer clothes or uniforms, or sometimes there could be nuances in those two, just because they are very different business processes in general. But then you are also looking at things such as your undergarments, formal or casual sports wear, which has its own nuances because of the fabric, because of the kind of processes that they have. The criteria that we have used to compile this list is product share, acquisition strategy focused on apparel category, product roadmap, community ecosystem, win rate, technology strategy, as well as investors. So now let's look at the list. Number 10 on our list is FDM4. And FDM4 would fall under that purpose-built software. Even though FDM4 is going to be adopted by smaller apparel-centric companies, and it's going to have very deep apparel-centric processes, for the most part, it's not going to have as deep inventory, as deep ERP-centric processes, the kind of layers that you are going to find with the mainstream ERP systems, whether you talk about Acumatica, NetSuite, Odoo, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. Those are going to have a lot more ERP-centric processes, but for the most part, FDM4 will have the operational processes. And a lot of the smaller companies, when they are operating with limited budget, for them, the operational capabilities are going to be far more relevant. In general, they don't necessarily care for the accounting-centric processes. But as you grow, let's say if you are going to be 30, 50, $70 million point, then you need to make sure that your inventory is going to be aligned with the structure, the way ERP processes require. So, but before that, if you have a business and you don't have as much implementation budget, then FDM4 could be a great fit. Some of these trends to keep in mind. Overall, when you look at the apparel-centric systems, the way their order entry is, the way some of the sampling process or the design processes are, they utilize very different integration, very different tool set that is going to be very hard to shoehorn with a lot of different ERP systems unless they support the apparel-centric processes. So generally, their supply chain planning, the way they plan, it's going to be based on some sort of design template. That's how they start their process, and then they are going to sort of overlay on top of that, whether you talk about size, color, etc. They are going to have the whole supply chain planning designed around that, and that's a very specific product development process, product entry process, which needs to be natively developed, incorporated as part of the product. Otherwise, companies generally struggle with that. You are also going to have much tighter alignment as well as the integration with the designer, and these are the style designers or the fashion designers that are doing the product development. They are tracking these products on a daily basis. So they have very unique process, the way they work with the vendors, the way their supply chain and procurement processes are going to be. And in general, 90% of the ERP systems struggle with that. And that's where FDM4 is going to have much tighter alignment with the color palette, and the color palette is going to be in your graphic design software, for example, Adobe Illustrator, and then you do require integration for that. And the reason why other systems that are going to be slightly more generalized, they don't incorporate these integrations is because for them, it's just not going to be relevant. For example, let's say if you sell into the machinery segment, they have nothing to do with the color palette. So if they are going to integrate all of that, then it's just going to feel irrelevant. That's why the horizontal systems will not incorporate as part of their data model. And that's why this particular segment is very unique in general. So from the FDM4 perspective, the strengths are the easier implementation. It's probably going to be cheaper. It's going to be very tailored processes. Some limitations to keep in mind is their technology is probably going to be clunky. They just don't have as much R&D budget as some of the larger vendors. So even though they might have the operational processes, their technology is likely to be clunky. And primarily a distribution software, so they don't necessarily have the manufacturing processes. Now, depending upon your business model, whether you are just the retailer or you are more of the distributor, and you are getting the manufacturing done from some of the emerging countries, for example, China, etc. If that's the case, then this is going to be a great fit. But if you require manufacturing, this might not be the best fit. Overall, scalability is going to be another weakness from the FTM4 perspective. If you are trying to accommodate many different business models, you may have many different distribution, manufacturing, supply chain centric processes. If you need to accommodate all of that as part of FDM4, it might not be the best fit. So that's number 10. Number 9 on our list is Odoo. And Odoo in general is a very smaller system in size. The way their processes are designed, it can support your transactional processes. But when you grow in your appetite for any sort of planning centric processes or very deep inventory layers or very deep MRP centric layers, that's where Odoo does not have all of those capabilities built in as part of their system. It does have many different apps for different smaller businesses. For that, you may have to use a lot of different vendors. For example, let's say if you compare Odoo with Shopify or QuickBooks, that's a great comparison because with Odoo portfolio, you are getting a lot more as part of the business suite. Now, Odoo does have some success in the apparel manufacturing space. And the reason for that is because the product does support a little bit of matrix inventory centric processes. It's not going to be comparable to your FGM4 or any other apparel-centric ERP systems that are designed for that kind of alignment integration, but Odoo might work depending upon how integrated do you want these processes to be, how much you are trying to accommodate as part of the ERP system. That all could dictate whether Odoo will work for your processes or not. But for the basic transactional capabilities, Odoo is a great system. So some other strengths to keep in mind: the diversity of the solution, meaning it can accommodate a lot of different business models, as well as the matrix functionality from the product perspective that is built as part of the inventory layer, just because Odoo does really well in the retail-centric spaces. Some limitations to keep in mind is the visual order entry. the kind of visual entry that you are going to have with systems such as your FDM4, Infor M3, some systems from Aptean as well, those capabilities will not be available with Odoo. So your process is going to feel a little bit disconnected. That's not the end of the world for the smaller businesses if they want to utilize multiple systems for the order entry. Sometimes the sampling PLM may be kept separate than the ERP system. Some smaller businesses do that, but again, you are not going to get that integrated experience that you might be able to get with FDM4 or Infor M3 or several other systems that we are going to discuss as part of this list. Some more limitations: data layers are not necessarily as embedded, and that's why it does not have as advanced capabilities compared to several other ERP systems that are going to be mainstream, and requires mature internal IT org, because Odoo claims that you can develop a lot of these capabilities just because they are open source. But again, that does require creating this structure from the business process perspective. So you are looking at a lot more business consulting effort before anything can be developed on top of Odoo. But even then, you are probably going to struggle in developing those. So don't do that unless you have very mature internal IT org, which is extremely familiar with how ERP processes are supposed to work. So that's number 9. Number 8 on our list is Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. And Business Central overall does have very strong ecosystem for the apparel-centric businesses. The reason for that is 90% of the apparel businesses, the way they operate, they are going to have a supply chain suite, the POS layer. That's where their majority of the ERP processes are going to reside. We have seen cases where they don't even store customer records as part of their ERP system. Sometimes even procurement could be very disconnected for some very large companies as well. Even if they are going to have hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, that's very common with apparel centric companies. Even if they are doing manufacturing, generally that is happening either in the supply chain suite or inside the POS layer, or they are going to have some sort of homegrown system. They might be using that for this, and that's why the whole ERP becomes just the GL layer. If that is your intent, then obviously Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central is going to be a great fit. But if you are trying to host your apparel-centric manufacturing operational processes, then you would require a lot more. And generally in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central ecosystem, what that means is you will require a lot of third-party add-ons. For example, capabilities such as your visual order entry, or when you are going to have those sampling-centric processes. For that, you would require several different add-ons. When you look at the PLM-centric integration, for that as well, you are probably going to require a lot of add-ons. But Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central does have a very strong ecosystem of these vendors. So you will find many different options, but those options need to be vetted. You need to make sure that they are going to work together when you sign the contract. So those things are going to be relevant. So some more limitations to keep in mind. Overall, the suite capabilities are through the third-party vendors. So you have a little bit of vendor risk. Implementation is most likely going to be expensive just because all of this validation testing, because of many different vendors, contracts, that does increase the amount of effort overall with the implementation. And again, it requires a mature internal IT org as well. So that's number 8. Number 7 on our list is Acumatica. And Acumatica also has some very strong presence among the apparel companies. But again, all of the constraints that are going to be relevant to Acumatica, for example, Acumatica is not a very global product in general. It can work in a handful of countries, but it does not have as a strong global financial processes. So generally, Acumatica is not necessarily a great fit for very large companies. If you are going to have smaller companies, then for that, Acumatica is a great fit because you have the distribution-centric process, the retail-centric processes. You have many different players, PLM players, etc., that are hanging out in the Acumatica ecosystem. So you are going to find them pre-integrated, Acumatica certified, but at the same time, you're still dealing with a lot of different vendors, a lot of different add-ons that is going to be part of your installation. some more strengths. The underlying CPQ layers that you have that might be okay for the customer coding processes as well as the core ERP layers, those are really strong. Some limitations to keep in mind. Overall, that visual order entry is where the real problem is. The whole supply chain planning is probably going to be very different. So you might be able to find some add-ons, but natively it's not supported as part of the product the way it is going to be supported with some of the apparel-centric ERP systems that are going to be purpose-built for this particular industry. And then expensive implementation just because of too many add-ons, as well as global consolidation capabilities are limited as well. So that's number 7. Number 6 on our list is Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO. And FNO in general is a much larger product targeted for the upper mid-market or the enterprise-centric companies. And it's going to have a lot more processes from the discrete plus process manufacturing, the MRP, inventory, supply chain, etc. is going to be strong. Where they are really going to struggle is going to be the whole apparel-centric processes, which is going to be your visual order entry, the way your supply chain works, the way supply chain planning works, as well as the vendor collaboration, etc., is going to be challenging. You might be able to find add-ons that are going to be very apparel-centric, but then you are increasing that vendor risk with Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO. So some other strengths to keep in mind is the ecosystem is very well adopted. They do have some very successful logos in the apparel manufacturing center space. So that's a huge plus for Microsoft. Core ERP layer, if you are going to have very diverse business model, if you are buying for pure play apparel manufacturing, then other systems may be superior fit. But let's say tomorrow, if your business model is going to outgrow, then you might be pigeonholed in that. And then you might require a second ERP system that is going to support that unique process. So let's say if you want to consolidate all of this so that these entities can communicate together, you can plan them together. If that is your goal, then for those generic use cases, your Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO is going to be a great fit. Overall, the localizations as well as the regulations across the globe for those scenarios, Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO is a great fit. Some limitations to keep in mind: last mile capabilities are going to be through third-party vendors. So that's a little negative, and because of that, you are increasing the vendor risk. In general, the implementation is going to be expensive just because too many vendors, the validation testing that you are going to require, that is going to be slightly more on a expensive side compared to the other systems that we have on this list. And it does require mature internal ITOR. So that's number 6. Number 5 on our list is SAP S/4HANA, and SAP S/4HANA is a very large system. So for the most part, it's going to have very global consolidation processes from the global workload alignment perspective. If you want to capture a lot of different entities, you are trying to consolidate them financially, globally, then for those scenarios, SAP S/4HANA is going to be a great fit. Where SAP S/4HANA is going to struggle in those operational apparel-centric processes, for that, you will find add-ons in the SAP S/4HANA ecosystem, but for the most part, natively, it is not going to be designed for that. In general, SAP S/4HANA, the large majority of the workloads that you are going to find even today in the apparel manufacturing spaces, they might be on-prem in nature. In general, the cloud capabilities and the integrations are not as mature as their on-prem capabilities. Even the vendors have not developed as deep or strong capabilities for the cloud. Some of those things may not even be possible because earlier you had complete access to code base databases, so you could customize as you wanted. And some of these customizations, especially unique to this specific industry, they are very complex in nature, so they might not even work with some of these systems, especially in cloud. So that's going to be a limitation for SAP S/4HANA. But overall, if you're looking for very diverse global product, then SAP S/4HANA is going to be a great fit. Limitations are very similar to your Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO, meaning you are going to have a lot of third-party vendors, and this is a very thick add-on in general. It's touching your inventory, it's touching your planning processes, any ERP requires this thick add-on, for the most part, you are going to have a lot of risks associated with that. The implementation is probably going to be expensive just because of the additional validation configuration required for this specific industry. And then it does require very mature internal IT org. So that's number 5. Number 4 on our list is Oracle Cloud ERP. Oracle Cloud ERP, in terms of size, is very similar to your SAP S/4HANA. For the most part, Oracle Cloud ERP does well in the retail apparel-centric spaces just because they were always aligned there. For the most part, Oracle Cloud ERP is also used as the GL layer, as the financial layer, where the operational capabilities are going to be kept inside some of the other supply chain centric systems. That's why Oracle Cloud ERP has a lot more presence in general in these spaces. The limitations are going to be very similar to your SAP S/4HANA, Microsoft. So last mile capabilities through vendors, vendor risk, expensive implementation, as well as you would need a very mature internal IT org. That's why Oracle Cloud ERP is probably going to be relevant for slightly larger companies. So that's number 4. Number 3 on our list is Aptean Apparel ERP. And among all of the systems that we have covered so far, this is probably going to be one system that is really pre-flavored for apparel-centric processes. So when you are going to look at this product, it's going to feel very natural. It's going to feel the way you do your order entry, the way you do your supply chain planning, the way you are doing your NPD process, new product development, the way you are doing design, the way collaboration is happening between your designer, merchandiser, as well as with the vendors. That is going to feel and come across very natural. So that's why Aptean Apparel ERP has a lot more presence in general in the apparel manufacturing spaces. But overall, Aptean Apparel ERP system is smaller in size when you compare this with Oracle Cloud ERP, etc. They are going to have logos in the smaller centric spaces, maybe mid a little bit, but large centric spaces could be a stretch for Aptean Apparel ERP. For the most part, the operational processes as well as the pre-baked integration for apparel centric industries are going to be very strong, but the financial, operational, inventory centric capabilities, the core ERP capabilities, might not be as strong. So some other strengths, the whole suite is going to be pre-baked: WMS, TMS, PLM, merchandising, planning, all of that. If you get it as part of the suite, then it's going to work great. But the challenge that you are going to run into this is, for example, let's say if your designers require a very specific PLM system and they don't want to use something from Aptean, that's where you are going to run into challenges, because now we are talking about integration and those pre-integrated capabilities might not be available through Aptean because it does not have as a strong ecosystem. So if you want to buy in bits and pieces, then other generic systems might be better fit. But if you're buying everything as part of the suite, if you can replace a lot of systems from your installation, for example, PLM, WMS, TMS, etc., and you are not going to get that change resistance from your own team, in those cases, Aptean Apparel ERP could be a great fit. Some limitations to keep in mind. Again, expensive with this piecemeal approach or the partial implementation, the one that I was talking about. In fact, it could fire back because it might never work to your expectations. So that's why, again, if you're buying as a piece, it's a great fit. If you're not buying as a piece, it might not be the best fit. It might not be as diverse overall in accommodating many different business processes, many different business models. So that's going to be a little con for Aptean Apparel ERP. Overall, the consulting base as well as the ecosystem is probably going to be limited. So that's number 3. Number 2 on our list is NetSuite. And NetSuite does really well in the apparel space. And the reason for that is because of their ecosystem. In general, NetSuite is a great fit for the apparel-centric manufacturing spaces because for the most part, the manufacturing is not necessarily as complex. The kind of bombs that apparel-centric industries are going to have, they are very assembly centric. They require a lot more materials. You don't have very complex production process that is going to have sort of the costing inventory centric implications. So you require lighter manufacturing capabilities, for which NetSuite in general is a great fit. You might not require a lot of add-ons from the third party. NetSuite manufacturing capabilities might be great fit for these apparel centric spaces. But then NetSuite also has one of the most prolific ecosystem from the apparel-centric perspective. Whether you talk about any sort of PLM, a lot of newer warehouse management systems, NetSuite is probably the first system that they integrate with. In general, you need to still vet and make sure that those integrations are going to be aligned with your processes and data, and that's where you need to do a lot more validation, even if they are going to claim that they have these pre-integrated capabilities. Sometimes that does require changing your business processes, business transactions, the way your SKUs are going to be coded, the way your BOMs are going to be coded. If you are not willing to change that, then you are going to run into challenges with these products. Some other strengths to keep in mind is data model is very friendly for retail and distribution companies, just because NetSuite always had a lot of logos in this particular space. So that's why they do really well. And again, not a bad solution for apparel manufacturing. Some limitations to keep in mind is complex apparel manufacturing may require shop floor scheduling. If you need all of that, then most likely it's probably going to be add-on. NetSuite natively does not have all of those capabilities. Other limitations: native operational capabilities are very limited. NetSuite in general is a very expensive product. Once you have used for a couple of years, then you would know how expensive it gets overall because of their consumption pricing. That might not be upfront. They might not be upfront about the consumption pricing right away, but it does have a little consumption component there, depending upon the tier you might be on, that you will come to know after a few years. Once your transaction volume has gone to that capacity. In general, the way NetSuite consumption pricing is structured, it's very detailed, it's very complex, and companies do hit very quickly with that kind of capacity. So even these small companies might end up paying a lot more. So that is something you need to keep in mind, and that's number 2. Number 1 on our list is Infor Cloud Suite M3. And Infor Cloud Suite M3 is a very strong apparel manufacturing system. And again, it's very similar to your Aptean apparel ERP, where the entire operational processes, the supply chain process, the design, merchandising, planning, etc., is going to feel very natural, the way you would have your processes. Integration with any sort of design tools, Adobe Illustrator, etc., is going to be available, pre-baked, integrated by Infor Cloud Suite M3 product, as well as directly from the vendor, as opposed to some other products. So the feeling is going to be very similar to your Aptean apparel ERP. The real difference between Infor Cloud Suite M3 versus your Aptean ERP is that Infor Cloud Suite M3 is designed for slightly more global collaboration, when you are going to have either vendors or your own entities globally. If you require financial collaboration, operational collaboration, for those scenarios, when you are going to have issues such as global trade compliance, if you have all of those, then Infor Cloud Suite M3 has those processes baked as part of the product. Some other strengths to keep in mind: overall comprehensive suite combining most components apparel companies need, as well as the extensibility. The limitations to keep in mind is it's just not as diverse. It's a very purpose-built system for apparel-centric spaces. So if you have very complex business model, then in those cases, you might outgrow fast. Or if you have a holding company, private, or you are part of the private equity company, and you are trying to streamline all of your portfolio companies, in those cases, Infor Cloud Suite M3 may not be the best fit. It's not the best fit for the smaller companies as well. Infor sometimes don't even sell to very small companies this particular product. They might send you to some other products in their portfolio, but they don't necessarily have the apparel manufacturing capabilities. Overall ecosystem is limited compared to other systems that we have on this list. So that's number 1. If you enjoyed this video, we publish these videos on a weekly basis. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. If you prefer audio form, this podcast is also available in the audio form on major podcasting channels. And we are going to include a detailed report, which is going to have much deeper analysis, a lot more details. So if you prefer that, check that link out. On that note, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.